So yes, thank you for attending and thank you for those who are watching and listening right now. Um, Welcome to our Ethnographer Extravaganza. This is usually a event that we hold every semester. And so, but before we begin, I like to do a land acknowledgement. This is just so important because we just want to acknowledge the land that we are on and that the land that we reside on. So, before we begin our event, we want to take a moment to reflect on the lands we reside. We come from many places and we want to acknowledge the ancestral homelands and traditional territories of the indigenous peoples who have been here. San Diego Mesa College is built on the ancestral homelands of the Kumeyaay people. We acknowledge and honor their tremendous contributions to our region and thank them for their stewardship, past, present, and future. We also want to honor the legacy of the African diaspora, Black life, and the free and slave labor which this country was built upon. We acknowledge, protect, and uplift this humanity of our Indigenous and Black sisters and brothers. With this acknowledgement, we want to give honor through our work and continue to stand up for racial and social injustice. And yeah, so thank you so much. Again, my name is Andrew Revelo. I'm a project assistant at Work-Based Learning, and I'll hand it back off to Wendy. Oh, wait.
Yeah, mute, Wendy. I'm so good at muting myself. Okay. Anyway, I just wanted to point out I'm a facilitator for today's event along with Caitlin and Andrew. And I just wanted to remind everyone that this is being recorded to share with those who are unable to attend. Please fill out our survey. The link is in the chat. This helps us learn more about our audience and improve what we do. I teach English composition courses with the theme of ethnography and qualitative research. In other words, my students and I study the work of people who do research for a living. Ethnography prioritizes lived experience, observational powers, and diverse perspectives. And students bring so much of these skills to the table. I'm always grateful to them. Today, we are over the moon to present Dr. Darla Cooper, Executive Director of the RP Group. Dr. Cooper is dedicated to using inquiry data and evidence to improve the lives of all community college students. She is currently co-directing Through the Gate, a research study that examines what happens with students who are ready to transfer but do not. Thanks so much for coming, Darla. Shall we get started?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, tell us about your college and career journeys.
Sure. I figure out, do you tell the story forward or tell it backward? But I started off, I went out of high school to university and wandered around for a couple of years before landing on psychology as my major. So that's what my bachelor's is in. And while I was in college, I started to think that I wanted to be a therapist. And so, was taking psychology courses and then got very fortunate to get a work study job where I got to be a peer counselor. And I worked with high school students and just kind of talked to them about college and looked at, what they needed to classes and talked to them about what it's like to be in college and, those kinds of things. And that kind of firmed my commitment to, okay, I'm on the right path. I want to be a counselor. And so I did that, and I went and went into graduate school, again, still thinking I was going to be a therapist. Took the first course in counseling and figured out that I could not be a therapist, that I don't have the emotional makeup, fortitude, whatever it is that therapists have. I don't have it. But I still liked counseling. I just didn't want to kind of deal with the heavy stuff, life. I didn't want to deal with that. So then it was kind of like, okay, now what? I'm in graduate school. You're supposed to know what you're doing when you get to graduate school. So just to let you know, even if you have this kind of crisis, as far as graduate school, it's okay. You can always figure it out. So I went to the Career Center. Since I was a student, I could do that. And I took all the tests, to figure out what to do. and I went to meet with the career counselor. And while we were going over my test results, I had that kind of moment of clarity. Some people might call it an epiphany, where I just kind of stopped her and said, hold on, how'd you get your job? Because this is the counseling I think I'm equipped for, is a in the academic setting. So she told me that I needed to get a master's degree, and there was actually one that was kind of dedicated to college counseling. And so that's what I did. And so I did counseling for about 10 years. And then there's a longer story I won't get into as to why I moved away from that. But I would sum it up in terms of in two word or one word, burnout. Um, so a lot of it had to do with the kind of counseling I was doing, a lot of trauma. I ended up being a therapist in many ways, even though that wasn't my plan. Um, and I got into research in graduate school in an internship. So kind of both of my career paths started with exposure, started with having an opportunity to try it out. And I wish more of our students had those opportunities earlier in their trajectories to figure out, yes, I'm on the right path for me, at least for now, or no, this is not what I thought it was, or I'm not what I thought I was, or the fit is not there. So I usually encourage students that if you think you know what you want to do and you haven't tried it in some way, shape, or form, try to find a way to get that exposure, to be, to do it, even if you're not obviously doing the job, you're doing something kind of paraprofessional or something in the field, some way to get exposure to it, just to make sure that it is what you think it is, and that it is kind of at least the path that you want to pursue for now. And I add the words for now because I just already told you that I changed my career. So it can, and I actually technically changed it again, but we can get to that. So I had an internship class in graduate school, and you could pick pretty much whatever you wanted. And I did the first half of the semester in counseling. I was counseling student athletes. And I was like, okay, now I need something for the second half of the semester, but I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. I go to my teacher for that internship course, and she said, well, the vice president of student affairs needs help with surveys. I think you should go do that. And I was like, surveys? That sounds boring. Why would I want to do that? And she was basically much nicer than this, but she basically said, just shut up and go. I think you'll be good at it. Fine. Sometimes your teacher tells you what to do and you just do it. So I go and meet this vice president and started helping her out with the surveys and got really into it. And started, because again, I think my job was really just data entry. I was just entering the surveys. That's what I was, hired to do. But while I was doing that, I could see how people didn't understand the question. Based on their answer, I could see like, oh, if you asked it this way, or if you move the sequence it this way, or I started to have all these ideas about how this professional could improve her survey. And I'm still, I don't know, second, third year of grad school at this point. I'm like, what do I know? And I'd never done, research. I had taken statistics, but by that point, but that was about it. And I went and met with her, and I had like pages of notes that I had taken about how to improve her survey. And she was like, basically, okay, thank you. I can see that you're really interested and excited about that. There are reasons why the survey is the way it is, and I'm happy to explain those to you. But she saw something, in that, in me, that anyway, that again, it's a much longer story, but just fast forward. So that was an unpaid internship, by the way, but it turned into a paid graduate assistant job. And then years later, it turned into a paid job, like full-time job, where I became the director of survey research. And it all started with an internship I didn't want, or at least I didn't think I wanted. So a lot of times people see things in you, see that you can't yet see in yourself. opportunities that they think it might be a good fit for you. And sometimes if you're not sure, sometimes it's good to see yourself through someone else's eyes and try new things. You know, because I said I wouldn't have had. So I've been doing research for most of my career at this point, and it's evolved into different opportunities. But now when I mentioned that I'm on my third career, is that I actually run the RP group. I'm the CEO of that organization, which is technically another career, running a nonprofit. I still do some research, but mostly, you know, I have people who do the actual research. I still do focus groups quite a bit, and so I still stay in touch with the research. I like to do focus groups because they keep me in touch with students and what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what they're experiencing, and that really informs the research that we do. But that was more or less the how did I get here? Long version of that. So it wasn't a straight line. It wasn't necessarily linear, and it's really was about listening to people, listening to myself, obviously, and being open to opportunities and yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Cooper. This might be a good time for some questions. Connor, are you ready to ask some questions on the students' behalf, or would you prefer I started?
I can start.
Great.
I'm going to take a moment to find one that's not how did you get here? Because like most of them are. Um, what inspired you to write unpacking the factors?
Well, it's interesting, the wording of that question. I saw there were kind of quite a few questions that were about like why this research. But I have to be full disclosure, I didn't write it. That's part of the thing in terms of when you get to this position. I don't do a lot of the writing anymore. I did. I don't run a lot of the statistics anymore. There's a lot of those things that I don't do anymore, but um, I'm still engaged, and it's been a journey to figure out how to be engaged because I have obviously if I'm running the whole organization, I got other things that I have to do. So I don't have the time that I used to have when I would say just a researcher. That sounds bad, but only doing research, that sounds bad. But I read and edit every report. I look at survey instruments and provide feedback. I help design the focus groups. I already mentioned that I sometimes will do the focus groups. So that it's just been an interesting journey figuring out how to stay involved and still influential with the research without actually doing it anymore. But to answer the question of why this research, we did a study a few years back where we found that there was a group of students who were completing all or most of their transfer requirements, but then not transferring. And so it's a head scratcher, right? Like, why would anybody do that? Like, what's going on? So in doing that research, what we found a lot of things, by the way, and I'm happy to share that link with you it's called Through the Gate. And it was, again, really this idea of students getting kind of at the gate or somewhere near the gate, but then not going through the gate. So that was kind of the premise of that study. So when we disaggregated we've disaggregated the data by many, many factors, but one of them, was race. And what we found was of all students, Black students were the most likely to transfer if they got to a certain point. So, like, if all other things are equal and you just look at the students who made it to this kind of at the gate, near the gate threshold, Black students were the most likely to transfer than anybody. Now, when you look at the students who are most likely to transfer from like 0 units, basically, when you start looking at them as freshmen, they're among the least likely to transfer. So something is happening, but basically between 0 and 60 units where the odds shift and they become, most likely to transfer. So that's what inspired the new study, the one that you all saw, the African American transfer tipping point. And it was really about trying to unpack that to figure out what is that tipping point? When does it shift? And based on what? And so that was kind of the inspiration for wanting to dig into that and try to identify those factors that influence the likelihood that a Black student will or won't transfer.
All right, that's cool. So it was something unexpected in the data.
Yes and no. I think it was unexpected for most people because I think, unfortunately, we've all been kind of preconditioned to see certain groups at the bottom because they often are, whether that's African Americans, Native Americans, Latinx, Latina students, on a lot of academic measures, graduation rates, transfer rates, success rates, all the different kind of ways that colleges measure student success. When they disaggregate by race, that's usually how it plays out. So to find something that was the opposite of that, at least for one group, then it really seemed to call for more investigation. On a side note, and the only reason I didn't share this one, and then I can't share it is because it's not written yet, is we call these our spin-off studies. So the African American Transfer Tipping Point is a spin-off. I don't know if you're old enough to know about spin-off TV shows, but it's like that. We have another one that's it started a little bit later, so it's still in progress. But one of the other findings from Through the Gate was that our Latinx, Latina, Hispanic students were the most likely to earn an ADT. Do you all know what an ADT is? The Associate Degree for Transfer. So it's a degree designed specifically for those who want to transfer, mostly specifically to the CSU system. So kind of lays it out and it basically says, if you get this degree, you meet all these requirements, you earn this degree, you are guaranteed admission into a CSU. May not be the one you want, may not be the major you want, but guaranteed admission to some CSU, institution. So again, when you looked at it, our Latinx, Hispanic students were the most likely to earn, ADTs. So like, okay, great. But then that was coupled with them being the least likely to transfer. So you're kind of like going, again, another head scratcher, literally, where you're going, well, how can they be most likely to get the degree that is for transfer? It's literally in the name. But then be the group that is the least likely to actually follow through and transfer. So what is happening in that case? So we're in the process of doing this study and trying to uncover some of those reasons. And we're particularly looking at, because the other thing we found was that transfer was affected by geography, basically based on where you are in the state. And that, that makes some sense. So we're looking at kind of that intersection of how much does geography influence whether students transfer? And specifically, we're looking at a concept you may or may not have heard before called place boundedness. Have you heard this term? It basically means you're bound in wherever you are right now, for different reasons, right? It means you can't move. That's what it means. Or it means you don't want to move. It doesn't have to even be a can't. It can be, I don't want to move. But people have lives in their communities. They have families, husbands, wives, children. They can't just move across the state because that's the CSU they got into, right? I mean, you think about San Diego is a really good example. Your CSU, San Diego State, is impacted. It can be very difficult to get in, number one, and it can be very difficult to get into certain majors. Well, you get an ADT, for example, or even if you don't, you're eligible to transfer Well, you might get a letter that says, well, I'm sorry, you can't get into San Diego State, but if you want to go to Humboldt, you can get in there. Do y'all know where Humboldt is? It's almost in Oregon.
Wow. All right.
So you see,
All
but
right.
you
I
see
see
the
how it
lot,
is.
you see the issue, right?
Yeah, I see
Not
the issue here.
everybody can pick up and move from San Diego to Humboldt. That's
Yeah.
number one. And number two, not everybody wants to. So even if you could do it, whatever that means, why? I shouldn't have to move literally across the state to do that. Or another example is there's a college called Feather River. It's here in California, but it's basically on the border with Nevada. The closest CSU to them is in Humboldt, which is on the coast. So if you've ever looked or driven across the state of California at any point, that is not a commute you can make on a daily basis. To drive from almost in Nevada all the way to the California coast to go to school. And who's to say that you can just move and pick up your whole life and your family, your job, whatever it is. So it's this idea that geography matters. And obviously in our more rural areas, people have fewer choices. And so we're looking at what is all of that how does that influence students actually following through to transfer?
Okay, that's really interesting. I never really thought about any of that before. I never really thought about how rural areas would have fewer choices. To me, that never lined up, but it totally makes sense now that I see it.
Yeah, sometimes the nearest public university can be 200 miles away.
Yeah. Yeah, this country's huge. I can totally see that. Yeah. So another question, do we still have time?
As far as I know.
All
Definitely.
right. So oh, they didn't put their name. Okay, well then I'll just read it as if it's mine. I really enjoyed reading your article. After reading your research, after writing your research, what advice would you give to any student who is struggling with their transfer issues?
I saw that question. There was a couple other similar kind of questions in terms of advice. And the first thing that kind of popped into my head is see a counselor. But I also know that easier said than done, depending on your institution and the processes that are in place, to gain access to a counselor. But that's probably one of your best bets. A few other things I would say is if you are eligible for any of the programs on your campus that include counseling, include a dedicated counselor, sign up for them. Whether that's EOPS, DSPS, if you have Puente, Emoja, there's all different kinds of programs depending on the campus where in some cases you're required to see a counselor at least once or twice a semester. Other times it's not necessarily a requirement, but it's accessible and available to you because at least from what I've seen and talking to students and doing research, having access to that counselor can make a real difference. And even more than just access, having a relationship with a counselor is even more beneficial because number one, every time you see the counselor, you don't have to start from the beginning and tell your whole life story and what you're doing and what your goals are and what you're dealing with on the daily basis. This person, knows you on some level and can advise you accordingly. Plus, it also gives you an opportunity to build trust because you walk in, you see a counselor, and it's like, well, I don't really know you. So I may not necessarily tell you everything. That might actually be helpful in terms of counseling me, And so I think sometimes students don't get the best counseling because they don't or aren't able to or don't feel comfortable telling their whole situation. In terms of, how much are you working? Where are you working? What kind of work is it? How many classes? I mean, I can see how many classes you're taking, but even what the combination of classes, what are you thinking about taking? Right? Because I might tell you, oh, don't take those two classes together. That might be a lot. or just getting to know you to kind of give you the best customized, tailored advice to your situation and your goals and all of that. So I wish having that relationship with a counselor was an option for everyone. That's what I would love to see us figure out a way to make that happen. And again, not everybody needs the same relationship. That's the other thing. There's not one relationship. There's the student who might just need to check in. Hey, Wendy, I'm thinking about doing this. Let me just send, sending you a quick email, text message, whatever. How does this look? Does this look good? I need, should I take these classes together? Or what about this teacher or whatever? Some people just need like quick questions, like, yeah, because I'm good. I know what I'm doing. I know I'm all of that. Right. But then the other flip side of that is the person who doesn't know what they're doing and they're not even sure why they're in school and they can't figure out what major or what career or why am I here, and they need, somebody to listen and to maybe start, provide some guidance, give them some options, in terms of, well, why not? Have you tried this? Have you looked into that? Maybe you should talk to this person. Again, but you're not going to get that from the 20-minute appointment that's just really designed to do an ed plan. Because most of the time they're just, it's very transactional, right? What's your major? What do you want to do? Okay, take these classes. Next.
Yeah, I've definitely felt that before. Not like in a bad way, but where I've definitely felt like it's just bang, bang, boom, and you're done, and you're just kind of put in and sent out. I totally see all of that right there. Um, Let me see if I can find a question that's related to that.
While you look, Connor, I have a related question I would like to ask. Um, didn't you also find, Darla, that students who took math and English and passed them in their first year were way more likely to transfer?
I did find that. I don't know if I was going to do the actual presentation for the tipping point, but that was, if you can, it definitely makes a difference. And the tipping point, again, this was, this particular study was focused on Black students, but honestly, a lot of what we found applies to all students, just in different ways, like different intensities, for example. But the number one factor, I think, for all students was completing transfer level English and math in their first year. That would be the best thing you can do to kind of increase your chances of transfer. The next best thing is just get math out of the way. If you just, sorry, no offense, Wendy, but to do math in your first year. And then if you can't do that, then do English and get that done in your first year. And then after that is counseling. See a counselor. It matters. It helps students be successful. And we did find some links between how often you see a counselor and success as well. A positive, correlation there, where the more often you see students who saw a counselor more often were more likely to transfer as well.
Darla, we have a comment in the chat from
Mhm.
Lance and followed up by Dan. Maybe it would be better for some students to go straight to CSU before their personal entanglements grow during community college and they get geographically trapped. One barrier to this is the very high dorm rent in California. Another ridiculous barrier is the requirement to choose a major before enrolling as a freshman. And then Dan asked, do you mean going to a CSU right after high school? Do you have thoughts on that that are borne out by your research?
I don't know about by the research, but I always have thoughts.
Or what are your thoughts? You're an expert.
No, I think that can be the truth for some students, but some students have those entanglements before they even graduate from high school. And there's a lot of students who are supporting their families while they're in high school. And so picking up and leaving is just because they graduated from high school is not really an option for them, because their family needs them to continue to work, to continue to support. A lot of people have younger siblings. that they're taking care of grandparents, and other extended family they're taking care of. And so they have these entanglements, especially if they're family from birth. So that is not an option. But I agree that for some students, for sure, the longer you stay, the more entangled you get, for certain. So I think some students, it might definitely benefit from leaving right out of high school, if that's an option. But you're right, the dorm is, even if you don't live in the dorm, rent is high everywhere, and depending on where in the state, it's obviously even higher. So money's a factor for a lot of students. The one about choosing a major, that one's tough, because if we're trying to strike the balance between not wanting students to just kind of wander around and not really ever get on a path, or at least the wandering that they're doing is not strategic. It's kind of arbitrary, and so they never quite find their way, and they're just taking classes and racking up debt. Uh, uh, and they have nothing to show for it, because those classes don't coalesce into any particular, not even just like a particular degree or certificate, but just even a particular area in general. So it's trying to strike this balance of not wanting to box students in and still leave them space to explore, but not have that exploration go to waste. I actually, I didn't realize it at the time. A lot of these things come with hindsight. But the school I went to, so I actually went to UCSD. That was the school. You might know it. I'm from Los Angeles, so I was one of the people who was able to move right out of high school and get out of my entanglements. Although I was home every weekend the freshman year. That's another story. Anyway, I was very homesick, even being that close. But I trying to think of, I shouldn't have distracted myself with what I was saying. Oh, I know. So in the college that I was in at UCSD, the options were, they didn't have the typical GE pattern where you got to take one of these and two of those, and all those different little buckets, and you've got to take different courses in each bucket. It was pick your major-ish, like, or at least pick what we would probably today call meta majors, or I don't know what if you have a different name for them at Mesa. Community.
Academic and career pathways,
There you go.
ACPs.
So, those pathways. So kind of just to have an idea of like what area. So you don't have to pick like all the way down to the major, but sometimes you can just, a lot of my journey has been a process of elimination. I remember I said I wandered around for the first couple of years, trying to figure out what was I going to do and taking classes in these different areas. But all of my classes counted for my degree. I didn't have any extra units at the end, none. It was all, but part of that had to do with the flexibility that was built into my GE pattern. And the fact that, they're on the quarter system. So if you added up all the classes that you needed to take for the GE, plus all the classes you needed to take for the major, there was like, I don't know, at least 20 units left over. And so I literally went to the counselor and said, what is this? This doesn't add up. What are these extra 20 units that because I have to have what it was like 180 to graduate, but all of this only added up to 160. What is this? And she said, they're whatever you want. So I was able to take 20 units that still counted towards my degree, even though they didn't necessarily check a particular requirement box. And again, in my school, my college, it was, you have your degree, and they only had three kind of like meta major areas: social science, STEM, and humanities. Because they didn't have a lot of, I mean, things are probably different now, but they didn't have a lot of things that didn't fall, or anything really that didn't fall in one of those three buckets. So once you kind of knew whether you were going to do social science, humanities, or STEM, then you could figure out the rest along the way, right? But the GE pattern was to take courses in the other two areas. So once I figured out that I was a psych major, then I knew I was in the sociology, and I kind of had figured out I was going to be in the social science because I narrowed it down to kind of sociology, psychology, that felt like where I was going to end up. So I had to take 6 classes in the humanities and 6 classes in STEM. And that was my GEs. So I didn't take foreign language, I didn't take literature, I got to take drama and music and art and stuff like that in the humanities, and the STEM classes were just like all the intro to bio, intro to chem, intro to this, intro to that, astronomy and geology, and was able to do all of that. But it was this wonderful, for me, I thought it was great because it had structure, right? I'm studying things that are outside of my chosen major, but I also had all this flexibility to kind of study what I wanted to study within, those boxes. And I still had 20 units that I could play with, which I didn't even know until later, because I just started taking classes, and luckily I was able to do that. But my roommate, who was hilarious, because she was the exact opposite of me. She knew she wanted political science from the beginning. So she started taking major classes, like upper division classes, when she was a sophomore. So she got done with all her GEs and all of her major courses, but like maybe by the first quarter of senior year, or even maybe the end of junior year. And she's like, well, what am I supposed to do now? I've taken all the classes. And they said, take what you want. You still have to get to the 180 threshold. So she just started taking, whatever she felt like taking. So I wish, like I said, I wish there was more of that, for students to have more flexibility, but it's just not, right now, it's just not built that way.
And it's odd that the flexibility kind of came at the end instead of the beginning, right? Where it might have been a little more useful in
Yeah,
terms
but
of, exploring.
right, but you see, because some people come in and they know what they want, and that's great. Go for it. Do it. And so, like you said, she got to play around or explore at the end. I was lost in the beginning. So I needed to explore. I needed to try to test things out and try things. I thought my whole family is like finance, accountant people. And I like math. I'm good at math. So I took that accounting class. I was in it for like 2 weeks and said, look, I don't want to do this. No offense if anybody's an accounting major, sorry, but it just wasn't for me. So I was like, okay. I took economics. That didn't work for me either. So again, I took several things trying to figure out, what do I want to do? I don't know what to do. So when I got to the end, I was taking major classes. I was doing the typical, upper division, stuff at the end of my degree, whereas my roommate was taking fun stuff at the end of her degree.
Darla, if you don't mind, there's a question I'd really like to ask about the study,
Sure.
and just your thoughts on it. How, what does the whole concept of putting students on probation, what effect does that have on students, and what would you like to see changed?
Oh, how much time do we have? Well, I should start with a brief disclaimer, which is I mentioned that when I was a counselor for all those years, a big chunk of that time I spent counseling students on academic probation specifically. And so I have a very personal connection to that part of the study and this whole topic. In talking to students about it, and I talked to them as part of the tipping point study, but I also did some research some years ago for a particular college, and they were looking at their program. They're trying to, like an intervention type program, like once students got on probation, trying to help them get off probation, right, to return to good standing. So I ended up talking to a lot of students who were either on probation, just got off probation, that kind of thing. And for so many of them, it's devastating. It's devastating. um, for different reasons. I mean, no, you feel like a failure. And if you think about the students who, and many of whom end up in community college, who have not had a really good experience with education up to this point, like through K-12, they're getting messages that are not encouraging. They're not hearing, you're smart, you're good at school, you can do this, you're college material. They're hearing all of the opposite. Why are you wasting your time? Why are you wasting your money? You don't belong in college. You don't belong here. And then to get in spite of all of that, you still go to college. And then something happens. And there's obviously a variety of reasons why people get on academic probation. But something happens. And then you get this notice from the college that is the tone of which is awful and so mean and just very much, kind of finger in your face. You've been bad student, and now you have to prove to us that you still belong here. And it's just this idea of, so I've already shown you that I'm struggling, at least academically, possibly in other ways. And now you're just gonna kind of pile on and reinforce maybe a lot of those negative messages that I already have about being a failure, about not being college material. And you're going to make me jump through all these different hoops, and you're going to take away my financial aid, and you're going to take away my priority registration. And all of this, and I'm like, this doesn't make sense, to me. And I'm not saying that we do away, like, students just take whatever and get whatever grades, and we'll just give a degree no matter what, GPA students have. This is more about having a different approach to students who are academically struggling. And again, not to take any responsibility away from them. They still need to do things to return themselves to good academic standing. But it's this idea of even just shifting. I mean, it starts with the name. The name's got to go. I'm trying, anybody who will listen, talk to the chancellor's office, talk to the statewide faculty senate, talking to anybody who will listen to say this has to change. We have to change the name of it. But that's just the start, because more importantly, we have to change what it is, because it's really designed to get rid of people. You couldn't cut it. We got to have a process to get you out. We're going to give you a chance to, again, prove that you belong here. But if you can't do it, out you go, shoo, shoo, shoo. You don't belong here. And I'm like, all we need to do is like shift our thinking to say something more supportive, that says, I'm sorry to see that you had a bad semester. What can we do? How can we help? What's going on? Come talk to us. Come let us know. Because again, I heard all different kind of stories, but I remember asking students, tell me what's going on. How did you get here? Right? Not to blame them, like, why'd you get on probation? It's just more like, okay, how did we get here? And you have all the different stories, the one where student, in some cases, all my fault. I was working too much. I didn't, take, and these are their words, by the way, not mine. I wasn't taking school seriously. I wasn't prioritizing school. I didn't ask for help. All the different kind of reasons. Some had a particular situation. I had a death in the family. I had an illness. I had a car accident. All different kinds of reasons why students get on probation. But obviously, each one of those scenarios needs different advice. You're not going to give the same advice to the person who lost their mother that semester to the one who was just partying too much versus the one who was working too much. And so you have to have a conversation with people to say, well, let's figure this out. I want you to be successful. How can I help you? And don't take away all their rights. I'm not saying give them a whole bunch, of stuff, but try to find some kind of balance. And then if they're making progress, if they're moving in the right direction, okay, let's give them some positive reinforcement. Let's keep encouraging them. Like, good job. you made progress. You're still on probation. Again, we're going to call it something different, but I'm just using that language until we have new words that we can all agree on. Keep it up. Are you struggling with anything? Like, do you need any help? What is it? Is it tutoring? Do you need financial aid? Do you need, what do you counsel, whatever it is, basic needs? What do you need? And let's try to help you stay in school as opposed to creating a path for you to exit. And that's what I would really like to see us moving towards, is shifting our mindset. And again, it starts with the wording. And I've heard a lot of different suggestions at this point, but the wording is just the start. It's an important start. Because right now, academic probation is literally modeled after the criminal justice system in terms of how you treat people and how you take away their rights and how they have to prove themselves, and the fact that it's not really built around rehabilitation. So anyway, there's some more work that obviously has to be done. Lots of it.
Go ahead, Connor.
Okay. I really like that speech that you just gave. Sorry if that's a weird word for it, but
No, it's a
that
little
really
it's
resonated.
speechy. It's speechy.
Yeah, it was good. It was good. You know how to talk. I It really resonated with me personally, and I feel like it would resonate with a lot of other people too, especially people that do struggle. And I wrote here in my notes right here that you were basically talking about how the school system needs buffers against situational probation rather than abusive probation. So like you said, there's a difference between how you would help somebody who lost their mother and how you would help somebody who just was partying way too much or who was working way too much. I'm kind of guilty of that right now. And yeah, the word probation is very, very harsh. I
For many students, it's triggering,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it triggers in different ways, but it obviously, the imagery that comes up when you hear that word is not good.
yeah, and
Nobody's like, yay, probation.
yeah,
Put me on it.
yeah, and it's not helpful either. It's really not helpful. Like, it's one thing if you just want to get rid of somebody, then this system is great. But if your goal is education, like you said before, if your goal, and I'm just trying to sum up your words into a way that works in my head at least. Correct me if I'm wrong, but to sum up your words, if your goal is education and betterment, why would you model yourself after something that gets rid of people? That's a huge question that I've had since I remember being in school. And you hearing that to me makes me go, oh, I'm not crazy.
No.
But yeah, I just really wanted to comment on that. I really appreciate that somebody that actually put in way more effort than I did to figure out all this stuff is seeing similar things.
Yeah,
And
well,
I
I do that presentation and I say a lot of those things. That's why I have that kind of on the ready
yeah,
to say at this point. But I encourage, when I'm doing these presentations, I really push and I try to give people practical things. I don't just kind of go in and say, change it. Bye. Like you got to give people, like, where do I start? What do I do? And most of the time what I encourage them to do is go get the letter. Go get the letter that you send students. And then think about whether you'd want to get that letter yourself, if you'd want your child to get that letter, your brother, your sister, your mother, your daughter, whoever. How does that letter make you feel? Does it make you feel encouraged? Does it make you feel like there's something positive? That does it make you feel like the college cares? that the college wants you to be successful. The other thing, so there's this letter, but here's the thing, I don't have data on this. This is just more anecdotal, but it feels like the majority of students don't get that letter. Like they don't physically receive it because it goes to their email, it goes to their house, maybe they're living there, whatever. And so most students find out that they're on probation the next time they try to register. So you're trying to register and it pops up, or you're seeing a person at the counter or whatever the situation is, and it says you can't register. And sometimes it tells you, you're on academic probation. And that's how you find out. And then so many students, they don't know what that means anyway. They don't know this term, academic probation. If you're a new student, especially if you're first gen, you've not really been in that space. You don't, what does that mean? I'm on probation. What? They don't know what it means just in general, much less know the ramifications of it and how serious it is, and all of that. And so I think some of the struggle has been, okay, we're going to move away from this word probation, but probation does communicate seriousness. And so if you have a softer word, it might sound like, do it, don't do it, whatever, So trying to find this happy medium between probation, criminal, connotations, and whatever, do what you can. There's no standards. Just get whatever grade you're going to get. And don't worry about it. So how do you find a word that's not as triggering, but still gets your attention, right? So we still need to get students' attention to say, okay, you do need to do something. Right. And that's why I remember when I would sit down with students and have this conversation with them about how they got on probation. Again, I'm going to customize my counseling and say, but ask them, okay, so what can you do about it? What can we do about it? What help do you need? And trying to figure out almost like a probation plan, if that's such a thing. We didn't, but really trying to help them figure out what changes they might need to make in their lives. Sometimes, again, if it's a situation like losing a parent, can you go on right now? Like that's kind of the question. Are you dealing with emotions? Are you seeing an actual therapist? Whatever the situation is, but trying to also figure out that sometimes, you never want to tell a student to drop out, so to speak, but sometimes you may need to pause, so that you can come back fully prepared to, do well in school.
Yeah, I see that. Um, yeah, the balance between harsh and soft words is near impossible. And the communication too is really interesting. Somebody in the chat was just talking about, I don't know how to read who it is, but somebody in the chat was just talking about how their friend doesn't know anything about the probation like ramifications. So there really is like live and anecdotal evidence of, I wouldn't say terrible communication, but it could definitely use some work.
Yeah. No, I have definitely had students where, even some of the focus groups I've done, you'd have to read the catalog to really understand the ramifications of probation. And let's just be honest, most people don't read the catalog, and especially not that part. So you need to have someone sit with you and explain it and customize it to your situation. The other thing I did when I was, counseling students, so we talk about why they got on probation, but I also gave them very practical information about what grades they needed to get back to a 2.0. I could tell them, like you're going to need 2 A's and a B, or 3 B's and an A, or, just very practical kind of advice, but it gives them like a target as opposed to feeling like you're just running on a treadmill and you're not really getting anywhere. Because when you're on probation, C's are not helpful. You will never get back to a 2.0 if you only get C's. Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, I was whispering to myself. Yeah.
Okay.
I,
But you need, sometimes, you're in the midst of it. You're not thinking about the math of it. That's just
yeah.
math. But you need sometimes somebody to just really make it plain and concrete. You need two A's and a B. You get two A's and a B, you're off probation. You're done. And so you can start working and figuring out this class, maybe I can get an A in, and that class, maybe. You start planning for success.
It's interesting. Planning for success. I really like that. Maybe
It's
that
pretty
could
good.
be a
I just come
better,
up with that.
maybe that could be a start. Let me write that down. Planning for,
And I think those are really good words to wrap up with. Really positive after the talk about probation, plan for success. Let's go with that. So thank you so much for visiting us, taking time out of your busy schedule, Dr. Cooper. Thank you
Well,
for the
students
people
are
who
busy
attended
too.
today.
Students are busy too.
Yeah, we're all busy. So we
Yeah.
got to be in this space for a little while together, and I'm really happy that we're able to do that. Our next speaker event is next Tuesday, not tomorrow, but March 18th at 2 o'clock with Lindsay Kunisaki. I want to remind everyone to fill out the survey. It really helps us with our research. And have a great Monday, everyone.